Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you've been having an amazing new start of the year, and I hope 2025 is going to bring you a lot of happiness, health, and just a lot of extra fun in EU5 if it hopefully comes out by the middle of the year or even the end of the year, who's to say. Today I want to show you guys a little bit of catching up, let's say, with the more recent dev diaries. We're going to shortly go through them, and we're going to basically explain how the economic system as a whole, with all of its layers, will be represented in EU5 or Project Caesar. First off, with the 1st of January dev diary, where we have the goods explained as both raw materials, produced goods, and so on. And then we're also going to go a tiny bit into the trade system and how exactly it's going to work. Now, this is actually exactly the same as it was in Victoria 2, where we have the RGO raw materials. Basically, the raw goods will be used as the prime material, and then that prime material would either be directly used in building buildings or pop needs, or they're going to be refined and turned into produced goods, which again will be used to either build buildings or arm your soldiers with weapons. Produced goods also being firearms and weaponry and so on. Now, Johan, which is the one that has been presenting this particular dev diary on the 1st of January, mentions that goods that are raw materials may be extracted from RGO operations in the locations that have them present, but many of them also have buildings that can produce their goods at slightly less efficiency. So that means if, say, your country doesn't have any actual raw wood or lumber or whatever the case, you can make that lumber by producing it in a lumber yard or whatever the building might be called, right? Whilst produced goods can only be produced from various buildings. Some goods have a base production, which is added to each market and is scaled by the total development of that market. So say some markets will have more development, and that means those markets are going to be more profitable. For example, the Italian markets will be a lot more profitable than the markets in the middle of Siberia, right? Because there's going to be a lot less development in the middle of Siberia. Some resources will require more trade capacity than others to move a resource between markets, and the base cost for transporting a good is 1 unless there's modifiers that increase the cost or reduce the cost based on whatever trade good that might be, based on the quality of the infrastructure, etc., etc. There's also a default price for your goods. So for example, horses here have a default price of 3 and a transport cost of 2, not 1. However, this can be, of course, manipulated, and the base price can be increased or decreased based on a few parameters, in essence revolving around if there's supply and demand matching for that particular good. So say, for example, there's a demand of 10 horses in your market, but you only have 1 horse in the market. So that means the price of horse is going to be 10 times more expensive because, well, there is a cap to it. It's going to be more expensive basically because there's a higher demand than there is a supply for that particular trade good. Again, a lot of this stuff is pretty much on par with what it was like in Victoria 2, one of my personal favorite games, and I'm really happy to see that this is essentially the economic system as a whole in Europa Universalis 5. Now, he does mention the price range changes depending on the age. So the age of traditions, price current ranges from 50 to 200% in the default price. So you can have goods increased in price by 200%, but later on in the age of revolutions, the price can range up to 20% to 500%. So you can have goods that are 20% the cost. So if the cost is 3, 20% of 3 is 0.6, right? So it's going to be 0.6 the cost of horses in the age of revolutions if there's enough supply of horses, or it can be 500 times more expensive, or better yet 5 times more expensive. So that's 15 the default price if there's not enough horses in your market in the age of revolutions. Also take note, goods are required by pops, units, building inputs, constructions, and more, and the distribution of goods goes like this. Say you have 10 horses, again the horse example because it's right the first one of the trade goods. Say you have 10 horses, right? And you need 500 horses. Who's going to get the 10 horses from your market? The ones that are the closest to the center of the market center. So if the market center is Constantinople and the actual location of Constantinople has a requirement of 10 horses, then all 10 of those horses technically would be going to the location of Constantinople. Everybody else within that region, within that market, will not get horses because they're further away from the market center. center. That's at least how I understand it from how Johan phrases it. Again, I've never played the game myself. I have no idea how it actually is. I'm just assuming everything, obviously, with the limited amount of material that I have from the Tinto Talk Dev Diary. Now, these are the goods, all the goods actually. We have horses, we have clay, which is surprisingly cheap, only 0.25 and 0.2 base production. We have sand, we have stone, coal, iron, copper, gold, silver, tin, lead. So we have a lot of base materials, a lot of them. Remember, a lot of this is going to be required in weaponsmithing and so on. Like, obviously, you're going to need steel for building your weapons, for building your guns, etc. And also take note, gold might be 10, the base price, the default price, but silver is 8. Oh wait, we didn't get the steel yet. My bad. I said steel instead of silver. You get what I was trying to say. We also have silk, which has quite a decent price of 4. Dyes also has 4. Incense, tea, cocoa, coffee. Now, I want to point out here something. Even though it might be price of 4 for these goods, right? These are really exotic goods. And in Europe, there's going to be no actual areas that produce these goods, or very few areas that produce these goods at the start of the campaign, right? So because there's still going to be a demand for these particular goods, but less provinces producing them, that default price of 4 for dyes is probably going to be 8 in European markets, because there's just not enough dyes to go around. Same goes for stuff like cocoa, like coffee. Of course, you will need probably to wait until there's an actual demand for coffee, so when people get more addicted to coffee, or you have more resource input need for coffee, obviously. Fiber crops, ivory, fur, lumber, salt, medicaments, which basically means medicine, variety of plants and animal products that have been used throughout history to treat all kinds of illnesses. That's going to be especially needed during when those plagues are going to be striking your lands, trust me. People are going to be scrambling left and right to find some medicaments, I would assume. Gems also default price of 4. Pearls, amber, so you can make your own Jurassic World in the Renaissance age. Or hey, who knows, maybe amber is going to leave a turd on our bed. Okay, enough jokes with him. Saltpeter, which is the cousin of pepperpeter, is going to be necessary for gunpowder production. So that's going to be a really in-demand good in the age of Renaissance, or whenever you start getting gunpowder units, I guess. Alum, which is a type of aluminium, I guess, used in dye making. Originally mostly from the Chad region, it says here. It was traded in the markets of the entire Islamic world, but in the late Middle Ages, other sources became exploited within Europe. Interesting. I never knew about this. This is something I learned from reading the dev diaries, to be honest. Spices, price 6. Wine. Elephants is default price 10, which is pretty impressive. Marble, mercury, cotton, sugar, tobacco, wool. And now, by the way, we're entering the food category, just so we're clear here, apparently. Wool, which not only represents the actual wool itself, it represents sheep, I would assume, which is why this is the food category. Has default price of 2.5, but it also produces 5 food per unit. So if you have 1 unit of wool, you have 5 food from that 1 unit of wool. Wild game, which represents, again, not only the antlers that we see here, it also represents the deer that are being hunted when you get the antlers. Fish, which also has 5 food. Wheat, which has 8 food per unit. Soybeans, which has 6. Maize, 8 food. Rice has 10 food, which goes to show that rice yields a lot more food per field than, say, for example, grain does. That's actually pretty accurate. I'm glad to see that Paradox did that. They've done the same in Victoria 3, which is a good thing to show. Sturdy grain, we have 5 food per 1 sturdy grain. Legumes, potatoes are 8, livestock are 8, olives is 4, dates is 4, but I wouldn't be too worried about this. None of you are going to be getting any dates, right? I'm just joking. You might get some if you invade the North Africans. It's pretty much the only way you're gonna get it. All right, mean Ludi is over. We kicked him out of the window. Now, nice Ludi's back. Bananas and fruits basically give 4 food per unit. And then we have produced goods. These are the goods that will be a result of your buildings turning some other goods into these particular goods. And these include tar, porcelain, naval supplies, which hopefully we're gonna see a few of in the center of Hungary again, right? No, seriously, don't do that, please. I appreciate that. Or if you do that, make the Danube a navigable river. Just saying. Firearms, of course, default price is 3, but of course this is going to fluctuate massively because let's face it, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to produce firearms. Cannons also is a big deal. Weaponry, glass, steel, which has a default price of 5 and a transport cost of 2. Cloth, fine cloth, and I love that they did the Roman purple for the fine cloth. Throughout history, purple was a very hard color to get. It was mostly during the Roman times gotten from the city of Tyre in modern Lebanon, and pretty much was exclusively used by the imperial household of the Roman Empire until it became more widely available later on as the years pass, right? Liquor also 2.5, beer, slaves default price of 3, paper, books default price of 5, jewelry 5 as well, leather, tools, which is going to be, I'm assuming, really needed for most stuff to be built, I guess, for like buildings and other production inputs maybe to create other goods. Tools would be necessary, I would assume. Masonry, lacquerware. I have no clue what this is. Lacquerware was developed in China and Japan as far back as the Neolithic period, more than 10,000 years ago. But I thought the world is 5,000 years old. I'm so confused now. It consists in covering products made of wood or metal with a decorative layer of lacquer. Product extracted from resin and wax. Oh, okay, that's cool. Never knew about that. Glad to learn something even newer from reading Dev Diary. Johan also confirms, and General Noob asks whether you can delete some goods. For example, you can kill all the horses. And Johan says yes, in theory, if you want, you could control all the horse farm buildings and remove them, and that way you just remove all the horses. Another question is, if somebody does that, wouldn't somebody in another location just build another horse farm and then get horses, if that's the case, right? I'm just asking. Then the horses just basically spawn out of ether again despite having been removed before. That's a really interesting question, actually, General Noob asks. Do trade goods change over time in places? In some places, Johan says yes. Okay, first off, big shout out to General Noob. He asked the best questions, in my opinion, all 3 of them, and glad to see that. Again, massive shout out to Johan also for answering these questions. Now he also asks, are mines connected to an infinite dimension of their resources, or do they collapse? And Johan says, we're looking into mine depletion, but in most previous games we have made, that tended to be very annoying for the player. I hope that is not a thing. I get it, it's going to be a little bit more realistic, but the truth is that most mines, even in modern times, have been mined since the times of the Romans, and they still have not exhausted all the resources. Mines have been mined for 3,000-4,000 years and they still have that resource. So I don't think there should be mine depletion, in my opinion. Or maybe just like an event like it was in EU4 where it reduces the amount that it produces by half or something like that. Also, again, shout out to Johan. 27 years of making grand strategy games for a living, and apparently that taught him it's the fact that design changes and we add to the game constantly. Yeah, I have to say this man is a genius. Like, most of the games that I've played from Paradox have been games designed and created by Johan, and these are the ones that I enjoy by far the most. So thank you so much, Johan, for all the work you've been putting in for 27 years that allowed us all to have so much fun. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about the trade system, because some of you people have been asking, how's the trade system going to be, right? Don't be alarmed. It's not going to be like EU4. There's not going to be any trade win left or right. It's going to be based on these trade goods that we see over here. You're going to be trading goods between markets, and that trade between markets is going to result in money flowing and money being created as a result, and it is dependent on the amount of goods on supply and demand. It's a fluid network where you can establish multiple trade networks, trade routes on the map, physical routes on the map that you see that go in both directions as long as they have access through those particular areas. Hope you guys enjoyed this short video. I love you all. Hope you have an amazing new year.